Let's go to 2024 independent presidential candidate Robert F. Kennedy Jr. He joins me. Good evening, sir. And let me talk first about what's going on in New York. President Biden is holding a fundraiser, but he is getting protested by anti-Israel protesters, which raises the issue of Israel and the war. If you become president of the United States, that's going to be one of the topics on your plate. Tell me, how would you handle this?
Well, you know, the objective ultimately is to get to peace as quickly as possible. You know, my position is that we need to support Israel. This is a defensive war. That Israel was attacked. You know, I'm against war. I think most of the war, all the wars that we fought in the last 100 years, with one exception, World War II, were immoral wars. They were wars of choice. This war is a moral war because Israel was attacked not only on October 7th, but for 16 years prior to that. When Gaza was free, Gaza was controlled by Hamas, and Hamas had declared war on Israel, was bombarding it on average with 2,000 missiles a year on its civilian populations. People say that Gaza is the most densely populated place on earth, but that's not true. Tel Aviv is twice as densely populated, and that is where they were directing the missiles. I'm very, very pro-Palestinian, Greta, but I think the best thing, most important thing for Palestinians is to get rid of Hamas. Hamas is a corporate kleptocracy. They've stole, the top leadership has stole billions of dollars from the Palestinian people. Ismail Haniyeh, who is the president of Hamas, the leader of Hamas, has a net worth, according to Forbes, of $5 billion. The two other leaders, collectively, they have a net worth of $11 billion. They've used the billions of dollars that have been sent to the Palestinian people. They've instead put it in their own pockets and used the rest of it to buy bombs, to build 300 miles of tunnels to attack Israel. And you know, Hamas has in its charter, it says that it's against the laws of Islam to negotiate with Israel, that there's no outcome other than the total annihilation of Israel. So I don't know that any nation in the world would have any choice but to try to remove Hamas. And I think, you know, Israel needs our support on that issue.
I think Prime Minister Netanyahu is probably, and many people in Israel, probably feeling that the United States may be slightly abandoning them, because what has happened in recent weeks is the United States is trying to discourage them from going into Rafah and finishing off, you know, the war to eliminate Hamas. So if you were president today, what would you do about that? You know, do you agree with that strategy? Do you agree with what President Biden is doing, or would you do it differently?
Well, I would do it differently. I think that Israel, first of all, I'm not a fan of President Netanyahu's. And I think if President Netanyahu ran today, that he would not be reelected. But I think virtually everybody in Israel supports the need to get rid of Hamas. I would be trying a lot of other things. I would be on the phone with President Sisi in Egypt. I would be working with President Ahmadinejad in Turkey. I'd be working with Putin and with President Xi and the surrounding countries, the Abraham Accord countries, to try to isolate Hamas. But that's not happening. And I'd be working with the Security Council. The Security Council, to this day, has not condemned the October 7th slaughter. Oh, you know, the problem is that the world has isolated Israel and left Israel with no choice but violence. And, you know, we're all heartbroken by what's happening, by the plight of the people in Gaza. I have friends in Gaza. I have many friends who are Palestinians. I have a family in Gaza right now who I'm supporting, who is, you know, living in this terrible situation. We're all heartbroken about that. But, you know, they're really, if you look at Israel's choices, it has every ceasefire that it has signed with Hamas in the past, 5 ceasefires, and each time Hamas used that to regroup, to rearm, to hoist the banner, and then attack Israel again. If the Palestinians are going to have hope for their future, if they're going to have a prosperous country, if they're going to have the freedoms that are enjoyed in Israel, the only way to do that is to get rid of Hamas.
All right, turning sort of to the domestic aspect to this. I know you and I are about the same age, big supporters of the First Amendment, yet on the other hand, at some of these campuses, a lot of Jewish students don't feel particularly safe. We're looking at protesters right now in New York. They look peaceful. They're exercising, right to assembly, peaceful protest. I get that, but what's happening on campuses, I mean, what do you say to the protesters on campus? And you and I both are coming out of the Vietnam War protest days.
Well, there are different campuses. If it's a state-run school, there are no limitations of freedom of speech. I'm a freedom of speech absolutist. If you're not threatening somebody, if you're not making them, threatening or encouraging the incitement of violence, then, speech, no matter how unpleasant, the First Amendment was written not for protect the speech that's convenient or that we all love, but the speech that is inconvenient that nobody wants to hear. So I would say on state-run schools where the government is involved, there can be no action unless there's actually incitement to violence or threats to students, etc. If it's a private school that is enacting other rules to protect the sense of safety of students, then I would say that, that many of these protests cross a line where they're making Jewish students feel uncomfortable, unsafe, and that those colleges, if they're constraining free speech for community protection in other areas, that they need to do it in this area as well.